Hi, this is Emily with Pixel Breakdown, and today I have Sage working on RIG Riot. Do
hmm
you want to give an intro about yourself and the game you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, my name is Sage. I'm working on a game called RIG Riot, which is a mech-action roguelike. It's kind of inspired by Armored Core, Risk of Rain, as well as a little bit of Borderlands in there. The sort of moment to moment is basically Armored Core 6, but with some tweaks.
Nice.
But it's a roguelike like Risk of Rain. Or, roguelite is more accurate, but I think the terms have kind of blended together a bit. So I'll use both.
Yeah, that's fine. I
Yeah.
told you before, but for some reason, mech stuff always has a soft spot in my heart, and I think it's from Evangelion and other animes that have it, like Gundam and stuff. So I am really excited to or talk with you about this.
Yeah.
So yeah, what inspired you to create Rig Riot?
Yeah. About, I guess, a little over 10 months ago, maybe closing in on 11, almost. Yeah. Well, yeah. Doesn't matter. In May of 2024, I had recently finished 100%ing Armored Core 6. I really loved playing the game, but uh, I finished it. But I had the feeling that I wasn't done with it. Right. I think some games, you sort of realize when you're done. Uh, yeah, I played Assassin's Creed Valhalla a while back, and I really enjoyed the game. I would give it a positive review, just like as a video game enjoyer. However, I was done after 70 hours, which is fine. Like I feel like I got my money's worth. Um, but I didn't finish the story. There's still a lot to do there. Uh, just because I was done. I had had my fill, but I felt when I was at the end of Armored Core 6, like I wasn't done. I was like, there has to be more, um, you know, more that I can do with this. The game does have PvP, which is a good way to sort of extend your playtime, but I'm not someone who particularly enjoys PvP. It gets me a little too riled up, and it's just not like relaxing or whatever. I think it's a cool thing to watch and whatnot, but it's not for me. So I found myself kind of scrolling on Steam day after day, searching through the mechs tag, hoping that someone would be making basically the game that I'm making. A game with gameplay similar to Armored Core that would have like a level of replayability that made me feel like I could really sink my teeth into it for many hours without the game kind of telling me that that's it, go home. So,
Right. I think that's great. I think games that are made by people who genuinely want to play those games that they're working on it's always a good mix, and magic always ends up happening.
yeah,
Like
it's been really
yeah.
cool seeing the areas where my game kind of diverges from sort of existing Armored Core stuff, and especially Armored Core 6, right? Um, when I started working on it, I spent a lot of time watching uh, videos from people in the Armored Core community, both newer and older fans. Um, and I found that there was, a fair amount of things that could be tweaked, right? Most people liked the game in general, but in general, the sort of older fans of Armored Core felt like the game didn't quite have enough depth, right?
Yeah.
There's kind of a line where, uh, you know, if you make a game too, I the word I want to use is accessible. I don't mean accessible like like color blindness or like having easier difficulties or things like that. Key rebinding. What I mean is if a game becomes too simple to execute, you can kind of lose some depth. And I think that in the eyes of a lot of the Armored Core community, Armored Core 6 fell into that. Um, and so I felt like there was a lot of areas where, you know, uh, there was room to improve, right? Largely,
Yeah.
my gameplay has ended up being very much like Armored Core 6, but there's a couple things. For example, in Armored Core 6, if you know, turn to look behind your mech and you like click to shoot or something, your mech will just like automatically turn really fast, right? To shoot in the direction that you're aiming, which is really nice for, you know, ease of gameplay and stuff like that. But um, in previous games, you know, quick turning was either a special upgrade or a special maneuver that you could do with like, you know, specific inputs and stuff like that. Um, and you know, I felt like it would be good to have turn rate as a way to sort of further differentiate the difference between light and heavy mechs, right? Um,
Mm.
but then on top of that, with adding turn rate, I found myself seeing some situations where it's worthwhile to have a way to do a quick turn. And so I actually recently reworked one of the sort of big movement mechanics based on community feedback. And when I did that, I also added a way for people to do a sort of quick turn. And so, you know, between things like that, or like in my game, if you turn your boosters off, it actually makes the delay before your energy starts recharging half as long, right? So you can, you know, like pull off an expert maneuver, like use the last of your energy. And then if you're, you know, in a tricky spot or like you have a window in combat, you can turn your boosters off and get a little bit more recharge and things like that. And it's, you know, just things that add a bit more depth without necessarily making the game less approachable, right?
Yeah.
Largely, it's pretty accessible for people who, especially people who've played Armored Core 6, but I've had a number of folks who haven't played any Armored Core games try the game out, and they found it to be, you know, pretty pretty easy to get up to speed with, at least to a basic level. So it's the sort of you know, easy to learn, but maybe with a high skill ceiling, as opposed to just being easy to learn, right?
Yeah. I think it's sort of like it gets treated as like a pendulum, the idea of like is it accessible or is it hard? And it's like they don't have to be separate. You can
Yeah,
have both accessible and difficult. But I completely get what you're saying where it's like if you simplify it too much, accessibility stuff aside, if you simplify it too much, then it's like you're not
you kind of lose
giving.
the joy of mastery. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's a, like a fine line between the two. And we will talk about like the community feedback a little later on. I think that
Hmm.
you're handling like that whole side of things really great. But yeah, so you kind of actually touched on my next question. So like mech based games often have like a very passionate fan base, right? So how does Rig Riot differentiate itself from like other mech shooters?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, you know, I've talked about sort of how it compares to Armored Core, but I think overall, you know, part of why I wanted to create Rig Riot is because I think the Armored Core games do something kind of special within the mech genre. So for mechs, there's kind of a spectrum of sort of like Western mechs to Eastern mechs, where on one end, Western mechs are sort of typically very large, very heavy, very slow moving, sort of a tank with legs almost.
Yeah.
Typically, the games for those are very simulation heavy, very much like, oh, like you have individual parts that can break off, and you're like probably in the cockpit, like actually looking at all of the, you know, the dials and bars and things like that. It They really do a good job of making you feel like you're in this just huge, larger than life machine, which is really really cool. Um, I've heard that Pacific Rim is a good example of that to a degree. I haven't watched it myself. I almost said played it. I know it's a movie. Uh, I haven't watched it myself, but you know, it's games like Mech Warrior, right? Where it's intentional and it's, you know, slower. But then on the sort of eastern side of things with mech games, you get stuff that's kind of more anime like, right? Where, you know, the mechs are kind of a superhero, kind of a sci-fi knight, right? In a way where you're kind of like flying around and like dancing across the battlefield, like destroying your enemies in a hail of, you know, laser swords and missiles.
Yes.
And it's, yeah, and it's really awesome.
Fast
But you,
action and dancing.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. That's one way to put the way that they fight in it.
yeah, exactly. And you kind of, you lose a little bit of the scale, right? It can be easy to sort of forget that what are moving around and doing those things are huge, ginormous, you know, several building sized, you know, vehicles, right? Um, and I've always felt like Armored Core does a good job of finding a middle ground. It's still more on that, you know, eastern side of things, which makes sense based on where it's made. But you know, it's, I think they, through a combination of art style and sort of like weight and complexity, they help you to feel more like a superstar mech pilot because you have to actually kind of learn to get to grips with piloting your mech. You know, there's a level of mastery that lets you get to that sort of cool anime level of things, but you don't just start there. And I think that makes it all the more special. Plus, the designs tend to be a little bit more grounded than some of the others, right? Like, if you look at the difference of an Armored Core mech and a Gundam, you can pretty clearly see that they're different, even if
Yeah.
they're both, I would say, in kind of that category. There's sort of another division within the sort of more Eastern style of mechs of like real robot versus super robot. Um, I I know that there's some discourse about that, so I'm not like stating an opinion, but
Disclaimer.
yeah, exactly.
Don't at
I
me.
Yeah, I'm newer to the genre. I'm not trying to start any fights. But you know, within that spectrum, you have like, you know, mechs that like are still impossible but more believable, but still kind of on that superhero side or more on that real robot. And then, you know, stuff like Gundams is on that super robot where it's, you know, the size of a spaceship and, you know, like I think if you do a comparison of an Armored Core to a Gundam, an Armored Core is maybe like a third of the size. It's kind of crazy when you realize because you don't see them next to each other, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think past a certain point you kind of lose scale. Uh, you know, is my opinion. But I still think, of course, all of the mech games are awesome. But yeah, as far as you know, I guess to touch a little bit more on where my game falls on the Armored Core spectrum, there's kind of there's a few eras of Armored Core. You know, nowadays if you say old gen, it kind of loops in everything before Armored Core 6, but classically old gen is the first through third generations of Armored Core, which kind of goes from PS1 to PS2. Um, and that's kind of like an even more classic style where, you know, you're not maybe boosting all the time and like things are a little heavier and clunkier, uh, and a lot of people really like that. There's a fellow solo mech game developer made a game called Gearbits, that is it's interesting because it's kind of Gundam inspired mech designs, but it's the gameplay itself is a little bit more like older gen Armored Core. It's certainly not for everyone. I like it. I 100% did Armored Core 3 before Armored Core 6 came out, and I had a great time. I plan to go back and play more of those games at some point. So uh, no hate there, of course. But then past that, you get sort of Gen 4, which is sort of a big departure for Armored Core, where the mechs that you started piloting became way bigger. But again, like you don't always realize that when it's human sized, but way bigger, way faster. You could do builds where you could fly infinitely, and just if you ever watch, videos of PvP in that game, it's just crazy. There's all sorts of awesome movement tech, right? Like if you activate your boosters with uh, at the right position of the like adaptive triggers or whatever, it activates like a perfect boost, and it's like super hard to do. It's like this tiny thing, but the level of mastery and stuff in that game is just unreal. There's some other indie mech games out there that are going more for that style. Project
Oh, yeah.
6, now called Omega Phoenix, is a good example of that, and it's really awesome. Then in Armored Core 5, it kind of went way heavy to a degree that like uh, your mech couldn't really fly up. You would have to do like wall kicks and stuff to get around. But it sort of made you think more about the environment and stuff around you,
Oh,
which is really
okay.
interesting. And then Armored Core 6 kind of, I would say, is, as far as the moment to moment, is sort of a blend of the sort of older gen kind of style movement, but with much more forgiving mechanics around boosting and stuff. Um, with a couple features from the fourth and fifth gen scattered around in there. Um, and so the reason I go through all of it is, I think my game is largely inspired by Armored Core 6, but a couple of the sort of things in my sort of when I started making the game, I had kind of a trailer in my head of like what I wanted the game to be. Um, and part of that trailer was the idea of like, dodging around between buildings and like dashing out of an alley, shooting some enemies, and then like getting up on top of a building, fighting other guys, stuff like that. And so, that has some uh, similarities to the way that Armored Core 5 played. And then,
Right.
some of the intentionality around having higher levels of mastery and stuff available in the game. Very much inspired by Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer. And then, just like playing the older games and appreciating like the weight of the mechs, and especially the visual style. Like even now, if you go back and look at those games, I think they really hold up. And so I think my game takes a lot from all of those. But um,
Would you say
yeah,
it's like a mix of like you're saying you kind of aren't going for just like because going around navigating through buildings and stuff that leans more towards like the Eastern style play, right? Would you
uh,
say?
I'd say there's some nuance because the like fast moving stuff is kind of what I would say is the more Eastern style. I would say
Okay.
the heaviness that you get in Armored Core 5 is maybe a little bit more um, Western style. But I mean, even in that game, the movement tech, once you learn about it and stuff, can get pretty crazy. And so just kind of I still haven't played Armored Core 5. I've watched videos about it and I think it's really cool. But I guess the point is just that my game is primarily based on Armored Core 6, and it mostly feels like that moment to moment. But there's definitely some important lessons that I think I've taken from the other entries.
Hearing you talk about it, I can tell you really grasp just even like the theory of like mech games and stuff. Like I could I feel like the knowledge you have on it would make a great book even. Um and hearing you talk, it's like, oh yeah, this guy needs to make a mech game. Like, even if you weren't making one, that would be my first thought.
Yeah, it
So
was really
yeah.
fun to, sort of dive into learning about these games and seeing, all the different sort of sides of stuff, right? Like the diehard community, right? Like you find all these, small, I guess my game's size channels on YouTube and stuff, right? Like a couple thousand subscribers, but just people who care, as much as I do, or much more, right? Just like loving these games and kind of keeping the torch burning in the I think it was like 10 years between Armored Core 5 and 6, right? People just really love these games and are passionate about it. And I really felt like I couldn't make a game inspired by Armored Core if I didn't do, do the footwork, right? If I didn't
Yeah.
take the time to understand the community and the history of those games.
Yeah, it sounds like you'll craft like a love letter to the mech community, sort of, which
That's
is
the
like, that's exciting. Yeah. Um, so roguelike mechanics and mech combat. It's an interesting combination. What led you to like merge these two genres?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think some sort of game design problems actually come up with it once you start, trying to actually make a game like this. But it sort of started because, like I mentioned, I wanted to have a mech game that was super replayable, right? Something that I
Yeah.
felt like even if I had done everything, like there was still things to do, right? Um, because in Armored Core 6, right, it's like I've done all the missions, I've got all the S ranks, I've found all the secrets, the unlockables, the parts, right? I've built all the mechs I'm interested in building, like there's nothing else to do. Uh, and so my thought was, well, even if I can make the bones of a good mech game, there's not really a world where I'll be able to create, enough content on my own to kind of satisfy someone else like me, right? Who
Yeah.
finishes everything in my game and is like, what else do I do? And so, I already love roguelikes anyway. I have 320 hours in Risk of Rain 2. I habitually try just like other roguelikes as they come up. Um, and I really love the randomization. I love the feeling of I guess opening up a game and kind of knowing what to expect and like knowing that I can trust that it's going to be a fun time that I can really sink my teeth into for a while, but also trust that the run I'm going on is going to be different from the ones I've had before, right? I can trust that it's going to be a new experience every time. And in fact, that's an area that I think eventually even Risk of Rain 2 kind of starts to show some cracks where uh, past a certain point, you have such an idea of which items combine together, um, how to make the best builds, and there's enough areas where you have some choice and stuff where you can kind of just sort of have the same run. Like maybe it starts different, but ultimately once you have 15 of every item in the game, it's like what really differentiates one run from another.
Right.
And so I figured, well, if I do it with mechs, that's that's a way that I can have all sorts of extra variety of like what your build is, and then there's other things that kind of factor into it too, right? Like you'll pick up weapons on the way. Um, I had also had kind of an idea kicking around in my head of a mech roguelike. Um, my initial sort of vision for it was that you would be kind of going through. I think Slay the Spire is what popularized it. For me, I learned about it from Peglin, but there's sort of a thing in roguelikes where there's like diverging paths, right? Where you can kind of
Yeah.
choose which way you go after each stage or whatever. And I was thinking it would be something like that, but where you could kind of choose mech parts, between stages and stuff like that. The problem with that is that a really core part of mech games is customization and sort of building your mech, sort of having that personal progression of the machine that you're piloting, like really getting used to it and sort of honing it over time. The problem, you know, there is probably obvious where if you don't have that permanent progression, it's like what ties you to continuing, right? Uh, there's I mentioned Gearbits earlier, another solo dev mech game, awesome game, like really cool combat, good mech design. Uh, the game doesn't have mech customization. You can kind of choose between a couple mechs which one you want to use, and you can choose what weapons you equip. But as far as the mech that you pilot itself, you can't really do anything with it. And for me, that was kind of a killer. I it definitely made me not interested in playing it initially. Right, eventually I gave it a shot because I think there's so few mech games out there to try that eventually you'll try everything that I think is interesting. Then sort of on the other side, there's another solo dev mech project called Mecha Knight's Nightmare. Sort of a combination of Armored Core, Earth Defense Force. I guess those are kind of the main ones. You're kind of piloting a big heavy mech against zombies. Which is, and it's really campy. Like the mech designs are cool. Like it's just really fun and action packed. But most importantly, you can customize your mech, right? You get parts and stuff like that. And that game did way better than Gearbits. And none of this is me like talking bad about Gearbits. I think it's just a matter of when you're making a game, there's a level of analysis of the market and the I don't want to say competition, but just the other games out there, right? I think especially indies, we're not really competing with each other.
Right.
The and one of the things I realized is like, yeah, customization is going to be huge. And again, I felt that myself, right? It's something I really loved in Armored Core. I spent many hours, even when I was pretty much done with the game, just like tinkering with my build, being like, oh, this would be fun to try. Like, maybe I try this different weapon, maybe I try this different leg set, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
just so much to tinker with and play with and see how it turns out. Um, and I knew that had to be part of the game. And even a more extreme example, there's a game. I forget exactly what it's called, but I believe it was actually made by Earth Defense Force devs, like official ones. And it had really deep customization. You could just make some crazy mechs. And the game did fairly well, even though it's had kind of lukewarm reviews, which the reviews are kind of down to the gameplay not feeling very good, right? It's a little too clunky. I think there's always a line where uh, you can only support customization up to a certain depth of like the structure of the mech itself,
Right.
after which it'll kind of change the feel of the game, right? Because I'm pretty sure in that game you can, you could have a mech without a torso or arms or a head or whatever, right? Like you could just have like legs with a gun on them
Oh
or
wow.
something, and it's cool, but at a certain point, if you also want the sort of satisfying, addicting gameplay, I think you need to draw a line somewhere. And I'm not saying my game has drawn it in a perfect spot, but um, you know, uh, I it's something I'm aware of, right? Um, I don't remember if I said it already, but like that game did pretty well financially, at least if it was someone like me who made it. I think it was a bigger team, but the reviews are I believe, sitting at mixed, which is just not exactly where you want to end up. And so you got to find the balance of the customization and the awesome combat.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think players like getting to make choices that impact gameplay, and
Hmm.
customization is one of those ways. I think it also, like, I'll preface by saying, like, I'm not an expert on mech by any means, but I do know typically the like mech that you're piloting, right? It becomes like a part of you. It's so it makes sense that like customization would fit well with this genre because it's like a part of you. You want to have some acts of creation in it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now you said that I might be jumping ahead a little, but you said that you had some like issues with designing for like mixing
Yeah,
the genres? Like how what sort of issues did you have design wise?
yeah. There's some sort of there's a GDC talk about it of like cursed game design problems, right? Where it's just sort of like an inherent incompatibility, um, where you kind of have to. It's not that it dooms the game or something, but it means that you have to come up with a creative solution. And so in the case of in the case of my game, one of the things that is kind of a cursed problem for a mech game that is also a roguelike is the problem of the permanent sort of progression, right? Of having your part upgrades be permanent, or I shouldn't say upgrades. My game is designed so that the parts are all kind of meant to be side grades, right? Everything is kind of a cost benefit, right? Depending on what kind of build you like.
Yeah.
Um, but I digress. The sort of customization and ownership of your mech is a little bit incompatible with the idea of sort of restarting every time that you would have in a roguelike. Um,
Right.
and so, I definitely had uh, initially when I was deciding what the game would really, be like, uh, there was some deciding about, if part progression would be permanent or what that would look like. Ultimately, I settled on it being permanent, and then going uh, to create a system where I can create a huge amount of parts, even as a solo dev, which is something I'm pretty proud of. That's kind of where the Borderlands connection comes in, where each part is kind of composed of a series of other components that make it look visually distinct and give it different stats and stuff. And so it also means that at the end of the day, I'll still get to enjoy my game and be surprised by it, especially
Oh
once
yeah.
the adding of content really ramps up. Um, but so there's that. But then on top of it, um, the problem that took me the longest, and I actually only really arrived where I have shortly before officially announcing the game. So in roguelikes, typically there's some kind of power up items that you get, right? They it kind of lets you create a build during your run. Um, that's the other thing, right? With like getting mech parts during your run is it would just slow things down too much. In a roguelike, you kind of want to get into that flow and just kind of keep moving. Like you can maybe compare a couple things, like maybe compare a couple weapons to see what you prefer or whatever, but something as complex as building your mech during the run would be a little bit of a momentum killer, I think. Um, what was I saying? Uh, the Yes, the power ups. So with power ups in a roguelike, typically you're building some kind of synergistic power feedback loop of some kind, right? Like, oh, like I have uh, a thing that makes enemies explode when they die, and I have something that makes like area things like explosions bigger, and something that makes it so that attacks that hit multiple enemies do more damage or something like that, right?
Right.
And so those all combine, and you get your god run, which is what everyone loves in a roguelike, right? Um, so one of the problems there with making a mech game is it's uh, like going back to the customization, which I know I keep going back to it, but I probably won't stop because it's, I think, just really core to the experience. Uh, I think it's really important to respect the decisions that the player has made in the garage,
Yeah.
uh, good or bad, right? If the player builds their mech poorly, like if they're over on weight or energy or whatever, they should feel that. Um, and I really struggled to figure out a system where I could balance the power progression experience of playing through a roguelike and getting power ups with also respecting the build that the player has constructed. Um, so when I first started, I was thinking, oh, I'll just do it like Risk of Rain, right? Like I'll have these items that power you up and stuff. Um, that's how you get more survivable. You'll do more damage, like you'll get more mobility. And the problem there is that your mech's survivability and mobility and stuff like that are part of your build, right? Um, and so, if the upgrades are just going to make the player's build not matter, uh, then I've failed, right? Uh, and so I spent a lot of time sort of going back and forth on different ideas. So, like I said, initially I was thinking uh, kind of like Risk of Rain. Then I kind of switched to the idea of just having the power ups be like maybe a limited amount that you like equip to your mech. And then you also get like some on weapons, right? So that the weapons can also be the power progression thing and um, just like the way that you fight. Uh, and then I eventually switched to a system kind of like Witchfire, if you're familiar with that, where they have basically you'll equip three you know, non-weapon items basically that one has stuff related to mobility, one is related to survivability, and one is related to like offense damage, stuff like that. And so I switched to a system like that. I was struggling to actually come up with enough ideas, especially for like the defense and mobility based stuff. Um, and so eventually I actually ended up kind of circling back to the more Risk of Rain inspired design where you can get items that'll stack and things like that.
Mm.
Um, but when I came back to it, I was a much better game designer. I realized, okay, I was getting too stuck in like the player's survivability and mobility and stuff. It's like there's actually a lot to do, as far as having like status effects, different damage types on weapons, things like that, that you can still combine for like a really powerful build, but it'll be more like offense or healing or whatever focused, where it's kind of separate from the things that govern, how your mech actually feels to play. Um, and so it's something where I haven't designed every mod like power up that'll be in the game, but I think I have a good idea of sort of what the no goes are, and
Yeah.
even with 10 mods in the game, people are already coming up with different builds and having fun with it. So I look forward to seeing all the different combinations once everything's finished. Um,
Yeah,
on
that's
top of that,
exciting.
yeah, it's really cool. Honestly, and I imagine we'll talk about playtesting more, but um, since I sort of accidentally started playtesting the game, uh, I've had people talking about it and theorizing, like making memes about it, talking
That's
about
so cool.
they're up till 5 a.m. playing it. Right? Someone the other day was like, "Oh yeah, like lately all I've been playing are RIG Riot and Noida." Right? Which Noida is a pretty big name as a roguelike. It's the game with where you like craft magic and it simulates every pixel. It's really cool, really deep. And to have my game sort of mentioned, even by one person in the same sentence is crazy. And just to see people having so much fun with it in a very incomplete state. Um,
Yeah, I can
yeah.
tell you get like a lot of your eyes lit up when you were talking about seeing like the builds people are doing and stuff. So I think
Mhm.
that's such I'm glad that you get to experience that. I think you also have like a good grasp of game design. Um because looking at the big picture of saying like okay, I want this to be important. I want like player customization to be important. So
Mhm.
I don't want to put something in that then deters from this, that, or the other. Like I think also you're right in that like you don't want like a power up to completely remove the choices that the player makes, even for the bad, because that also ties into like feeling like your choices matter and like the things that you do or the stuff you do like as a player matters.
Yeah.
Um
it's important that people can fail, you know?
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it's and it's like I realize it's not fun to fail necessarily, but I think taken as part of a whole experience, right? If it's not just like failing over and over and over with no recourse, right? It's like a failure that you learn from and like helps you to
Yeah,
improve at the game. I think makes the whole experience that much better.
definitely. Um, so seeing that the game does like allow for, or yeah, allows for like various play styles, like from like range bombardment to melee tanking. Um, I think we've kind of touched this, but like, how do you ensure each build feels like balanced but and viable?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I've definitely had a fair amount of people sort of have concerns about like, oh, like will the builds feel impactful and stuff like that because you know,
I
I
have
don't
no
want to say
concerns when
randomly.
talking to you. I'm like, this is one case where it's like, I am certain the builds are going to be impactful.
Yeah,
Like,
I appreciate it. I think part of it is that like a lot of the time that's in like YouTube comments and stuff where people have a far more limited amount of time with me to sort of hear my perspective and thoughts on stuff. So honestly, I imagine that the community will appreciate having this longer sort of statement of my position on a lot of things. But um, yeah, as far as sort of making sure that everything feels balanced and viable, um, you know, I've had people sort of worried like, oh, like is this just going to be a stats go up thing? Is it going to be like uh, how do we prevent like getting like the same part over and over, right? With like randomness. And the way that I've structured it, it's actually uh, every part is constructed of sort of a small fraction of a existing set, right? So that there's the a couple of the starter sets in the game are the scout set and the scrapper set. So the scout set is like a lightweight aerial long range kind of thing. The scrapper set is kind of a jack of all sort of thing for people who want just kind of like a very average start. And so if you get an arm part, it'll have a few shells are what I call the like component pieces. So it'll have a shoulder shell, an upper arm, and a forearm. And so each of those has a certain amount of a stat, right? Um, and so because all of the parts are based on a combination of parts from various sets, I kind of arrive in a spot where even though yes there's like a ton of like combinations that I might not expect the specifics of, I've kind of planned out from the start what the heaviest build is and what the lightest build is. Like I I can test, if I'm trying to make sure that like the boosting speed feels good or something. I can, change a value and then I can test it out on a super light build, a super heavy build, and then a super medium build.
yeah,
And if they all feel both good and meaningfully different, I know I've done my job right. Um, Beyond that, uh, the parts in the game also have a chance to roll with sort of randomized mods that can have you know extra like bonus stats on them. It doesn't change the base stats, right? But like you could have uh, i- an arm part with extra defense, or a booster part that maybe makes your energy utilization more efficient or something. And you can use those to like kind of push your stats past the boundaries. Um, but even then, I'm still pretty confident that uh, it's part of the fun of a roguelike is once you get to the point where you're like super optimized for like one thing, like kind of being able to fudge the rules a little bit with some of those things.
yeah.
um and it's not like it's going to be that far out of my expectations, and so uh I can kind of trust after doing the sort of limit testing, um that things will work as expected. Uh, this is my first video game, but I've worked as a software developer for about 4 years, and so uh, testing kind of the limits of the system on different ends is pretty standard practice. And so I think designing systems that work within a framework that is, understandable and testable for me is good. I've also been diligent about a lot of people will keep, game design documents and stuff to chart out everything. I have just like a big old spreadsheet with sort of the limits of all those things. It's really cool because then I can sort of test out, various like algorithms and stuff for how I want something to work, and I can play
Yeah.
with it ahead of time, right? Because it's way easier to change the values in an Excel sheet than it is to, change the values in a game. Though eventually, I did make as much as I could in the game basically come from Excel sheet, but that's kind of kind of another story. But yeah, just limit testing and sitting down and planning the limits before you even before you start making changes to the actual code.
I think that is an efficient way to test when you have a large set of data that it's like this goes on infinitely, infinite
Mhm.
combinations. Like,
You have to be
well,
efficient if you're a
yeah,
solo
yeah,
developer. There's no there's no
right.
way the game would get finished if I wasn't.
So I think testing it where it's like, let me take all the extremes and then ideally everything in between will work out. If it's feels good
Yeah,
still, heaviest, heaviest, lightest, lightest, and then somewhere in between.
yeah.
Um so I was gonna ask my next question was like about customization stuff, but I think we've already covered that.
Just a little
I
bit.
yeah, just a little bit. I am curious though, like when when you were saying like you made it to where as much could go straight from like the sheets into your game, is that like you set it up to where yeah you can like tweak it and then it's like a table that basically you
Yeah, basically. So the shell system that I mentioned earlier, uh, at one point, sort of earlier on, um, I was doing, just a whole lot of inheritance, right? Just sort of, I have the part, and then I have, this is a head part, this is a torso part, this is a arm part, right? That's actually still in place. But then for the shells, it's like, oh, shell, and then I have, head, visor, head, skull, head, accessory, right? Like for each one. And then for, like the scout set that I mentioned earlier, right? I've got inheriting from that, I've got the like scout visor, head shell, the scout skull head shell. It's already hard to keep track of. And then when you want to make a balance decision, you have to go and hunt that down. Sometimes Unreal has issues with even saving some of the values for stuff like that. It's a
right.
nightmare. But eventually I switched to a system where I can just set sort of in a spreadsheet the final stats that a set will have. And then when the part is getting sort of generated, it just goes like, oh, what are the stats of the final part? And then each shell has like a certain like, equation to determine like what, fraction of the final stats it is. And so that way I can be like, oh, um, like at one point I was having an issue where you could get two leg parts that just had the exact same stats, and that sucks. Like they looked different
Mm.
because it was like, oh, this one has a scrapper, thigh and a scout calf, whereas the other one has a scout thigh and a scrapper calf, right?
Oh, okay,
Um,
yeah.
and the stats would be the same, and it sucked. And so I went in and I like changed the ratio around of like what amount of each stat kind of comes from each shell, and
Nice.
yeah, and then like even during play testing, right? And it's something that I kind of knew before I let other people try the game, but I realized that heavy builds are really, really strong, and I want them to be really, really strong. Like you should feel a little bit overpowered, but the knight, which is one of the starter sets, was just kind of too good on its own. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to like tweak some stats. And so I could just change some of the final stats on the spreadsheet. And that just like will automatically kind of trickle down to each shell that is related to the knight. And yeah,
That
it
that's
comes down to
great.
the efficiency, like you were talking about.
Yeah, I think that ties into like foundations of like programming where it's like yeah, compartmentalize and modularize all this stuff and then it's easy to tweak later on.
Yeah.
Um and I think you handling it, I think your experience with programming probably helped with that, or just the idea that like kind of going in that like these things are going to change, so account for that, because sometimes the way we set stuff up at the start can end up, it's like, oh, this isn't a big deal, there's not a lot of numbers, but then later on it's like, oh well, now you're limited by your design choices at the start, because
Hmm.
now it would be a whole bunch of work to go back and add in the ability to do a bunch of numbers and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think like the way you're handling stuff is really good, and that's something that people should take note of.
Game development is hard, and they say that a good programmer is a lazy programmer, right? Try to set things up so that you can, support it and tweak it and enhance it with as little effort as possible. Um,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
amount of the amount of time that I thank past Sage these days for for redoing certain systems that would have just been a nightmare. Like, the this week I added a new set of parts, and before it would have just been awful, but like now I was able to just do all the models and then like choose the stats, and I was like, oh, that's not quite right, and then I could tweak them, and it's like, you know
Yeah.
doing that in a day as opposed to like on top of it, I have ADHD, which makes certain things just tough. As far as like if I have a task that's very monotonous and tedious mean the same thing. Uh, it's so much harder for me to even start it. But I love working on my game, and so I don't want to have things that I don't want to do in the game. And so if I can just structure things so that it's easy for me to work with, the game works out better. I have more fun working on it. It's everyone wins.
I think it is. It's like if you spend that little bit of extra time at the start setting up those things, then yeah, you can be that lazier later on where it's like, yeah, it just becomes easy. I think also you deciding to tweak like percentages because you didn't want like different builds or like pieces that get like edited to be similar, right? Using the same components but in different spots, you wanting that to be different. I think that also speaks to like your attention to detail. I think that's one of the benefits of again like creating a game that you actually want to play. And it's like,
Right.
no, I wouldn't want that. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
want
There's
them to be the same. All like I
there's
don't
there's a
know.
number of, yeah, exactly. There's a number of things that um I spend a lot of time playing the game, and I think as a developer there is a sense where when you're playing the game, you're kind of playing it to test it as opposed to playing to play it. But I still have enough, like interest in playing the game myself that I'll run into things and I'll be like, oh, that's not quite there. Like, oh, that annoys me. And it's like, well, if it annoys me, it's going to annoy other people. Um,
Yeah,
it's like I'm maybe less sensitive to it. And so I definitely need to change it if it bothers me. Um,
right.
and so there's a number of things like even it's come further now due to community feedback, but one of the things in my game is multi shops, where basically there's three choices that you can buy of either a power up item or a weapon. And when I initially added them, you would like look at each one and it would just like have the name. But one of the systems in my game is weapon capacity, where you're based on the mech build that you have, you actually have a limited amount of like how much like how heavy of weapons you can actually handle on your mech. And so I would get into situations where I bought something that I couldn't even fit on my build, and I'm like, well,
That
I wouldn't
sucks.
have. Yeah, it did suck, and I was like, I was annoyed, and I was like, well, I need to fix that, obviously, because if I'm annoyed, someone else is going to hate it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, I added the weight of the weapon as part of the display, and that for me
Nice.
that was enough. Though in playtesting, I ran into further stuff where people, rightfully so, were frustrated because you kind of had to like move around the shop in your mech to see, what the different part options were that you could, or the weapon options were that you could buy. Uh, but while you're doing that, you're also getting shot at by enemies, and
Oh,
it's just a
right.
headache. Um, and so because of that, I've added like a separate menu where you can kind of compare the weapons, and it pauses so that you're not in danger while you make that decision. And initially I was worried like, oh, this is going to slow the gameplay down too much or something, but um, ultimately removing that sort of friction of like, oh, this is just like an annoying thing, right? Like you don't want the moments that make your blood boil to to be in a game that you're trying to get people to play for hundreds of hours. Uh,
Right.
you
Or to
know,
come from like doing something with UI or like
yeah,
editing stuff
exactly.
like yeah.
Yeah, and so that's in place. I'm actually due to even more thoughts from people, I'll be enhancing that so that you can kind of compare the three to the weapons that you have equipped already, right? So you're not in a situation where you buy a weapon that happens to actually be worse than another one that you have equipped, right? That sucks.
Yeah.
And so lots of really helpful enhancements from community stuff, and yeah, just making things as, and even going back to efficient design, right? My background is in like web development specifically, and so when I created the UI pieces for my game, I spent a lot of time making sure that like, oh, these are reusable, so that like if I need to change visuals, I can just do it in one spot and it changes for everything.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Yeah.
yeah, and I actually like, due to again some player feedback. If anyone ever doubts that their feedback matters for my game, I I read every single thing and take it into
Yeah.
account. Um,
I think
you
that's why
know,
your community has grown because it's pretty large for especially like you're a solo dev. And we'll skip ahead some questions here because I do think that the player feedback thing is like something that you handle really well. And I do think like other devs can take note of like this is how you can build a good community is by actually making their voices feel like they matter.
yeah,
And I see you in there a lot playing with people or like your uh random like play test that ended up popping up or things like that. Like
yeah,
I think people are more inclined to build a community and do that whenever it does feel like they're being heard by the developer. Um,
yeah, and it's like, I think as indies, we need to, like there's certain things that we'll never be able to match from, like triple A's or even like larger indie studios and stuff, right? We don't have the budget, we don't have the time, we don't have the scale. But
right.
I think something that a lot of people forget about, because I think it's a little bit of a fallacy to be an indie and be like, oh, like I'm an indie, so I can make a worse version of a AAA game. It's like, no, you're an indie
Right.
so that you can flex like your special strengths that a AAA can't, right? Like I, partially because I love the game, and partially just like, I don't know, like coding experience or whatever. I work really fast on the game. And so, if someone has like a bug, like there's times that I have a new build out in, 30 minutes, right? Because I can just like be mobile, right? And a AAA team would never be able to do that. Um,
Yeah.
yes, there's weaknesses that I have, right? I don't have the marketing budget, I don't have the scale, I don't have the IP recognition, but I can be quick. I can, interact with the community really personally because I'm a person, right? Like, you
Well,
know,
also, you're not afraid to get the feedback because again, you set yourself up to where you can implement those changes fairly quickly. I mean, I'm sure there's sometimes a
mhm,
curveball that takes some time, but I think this ties into also, yeah, setting yourself up to where at the start where you can make those changes based on the feedback you're given. You're not afraid to get the feedback so much because
mhm,
like you can make those changes, and it's
right.
not like you have to rework the whole system ideally,
Yeah.
which also differs from like with AAA stuff where it's like, no, we have a timeline, we have to meet this, so maybe
Yeah.
don't make things as efficient at the start, or like don't take in all the feedback because then it does, you have to restart stuff.
Or don't prioritize optimization because, you know, you,
Right. It's like, what's quickest? Let's get this out the door, sort of thing.
yeah, it's like you need the spectacle, but it's like, you know, one of the things that's been crazy to see over the like, you know, around a week that I've actually had people play testing is how far the performance has gone, right? And as, you know, a gamer first and foremost, like I really care about performance and I want to make sure as many
Right.
people can play it as possible. And so, you know, just getting all of the reports of like, oh, these things are causing us lag, like, you know, like, and seeing like as things improve, people be like, wow, this is like the game is running so smooth. I'm seeing hardly any frame drops, right? Like from, you know, the first day where people, if you moved the wrong way, you would just have massive lag spikes because I was using a 8K texture for the dust kicked up by your mech. uh, you know, just like things that like in hindsight are pretty obvious, but I just didn't think about when I made that
Yeah.
dust texture months and months ago. Um,
Right.
you know, I really think that because of playtesting, the final product is going to be that much better. And it's, you know, like the like one, like I really want to play this game at its best, you know, and there's no way that that it ever could have been at its best if it was just me. Even
Right.
before I started sort of building up a community of people, like I had some friends and family play test it, right? And you know, maybe they're not mech fans, but they know when something feels wrong, right?
Yeah.
You know, a friend of mine was playing around with the mech customization, and she clicked on, you know, like one of the colors on the color palette showing at the top of the screen, assuming that it would switch to, you know, that color so that she could change that one, and it didn't. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? And so now it does, right?
Right.
Or you know, like uh, at one point the your mech has sort of a target acquisition system as one of the stats, and it sort of determines how accurate, I guess, you are at different ranges. And initially I had it where basically there was some like randomness applied to uh, you know, where your bullet would go based on you know, how high or low that stat was. Um, but another friend of mine gave me the feedback that you know, sometimes it feels like you miss because the game just decided you miss, as opposed to, you know, feeling like you missed because obviously your reticle wasn't on the enemy or something, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I took that to heart. I you know, I changed it so that now it instead it just governs like how fast your reticle gets to the enemy, and I'm sure there'll be some further iteration on that, but um, you know, I've really tried to make it feel like if you fail, it should be your fault, at least as much as possible, right? Uh, because it sucks to just be told that you can't play.
Right.
You know, it sucks to be playing D&D and try to open a door and you roll a one, and it's like, I shouldn't fail to open a door. That shouldn't happen.
Right.
You know, there's a realm of like this makes sense, and there's a realm of, you know, no, I can't believe that. And so really got to pay attention to that.
I think that that speaks to like sometimes the things that are that mathematically or like statistically make sense in the real world
Yeah.
don't translate well to gameplay stuff.
Yeah.
And I always think back to like the GDC talk from like I think Sid. Meyer. It was, I think it was on Civilization, but yeah, he was saying that like whenever I had it like be statistically like sometimes you would win the battle, sometimes you wouldn't. Like statistically, it would make sense. Yeah, players were like, no, I don't like that. Like, I don't care
Yeah,
that it statistically makes sense. That's not what I want when I'm playing the game.
right. It's
Um,
like I'm here for the fantasy that I actually have some agency, right?
right.
In a world where in so many ways you kind of can't choose how things go, it's nice to be like, no, like at least in a video game, I can be the hero or the master strategist
Pro
who
tag power.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Main character energy is huge, I think. I mean, even just looking at the reception people have had to the player character in the newest Monster Hunter game, more than previous ones, the game really makes you feel like your character is just this like badass hero who's like, you know, oh, this is a turbo dragon that has infinite energy. No, I'll still win. It's fine. Like I'll just
Yeah.
do it. And I think that's awesome. Games are about creating an experience, and you have to keep that experience in mind. And so, even if you don't win every time, like it should still feel like it's your fault, so that you have the opportunity to grow and have that experience of you know getting better and yeah, eventually feeling not only like the hero, but also like you earned it.
I think that it's such a simple way to put it too, like so obvious, but like so easy to forget where it's like, no, if I fail, I want it to be because of me, not because of a percentage.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I also think to touch on like what you were saying, where like your friend who isn't like big into mechs though, like did say like this doesn't feel right. Like I expect the color to change here. I think that
Hmm.
shows the value also of like um, having a wide variety of people play test
Yeah.
because the big mech players are going to be probably focusing on like the mech game heavy side of stuff or like
Hmm.
the things, but then you'll also have the other players who will maybe help focus on like some of the other stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's great. um Jumping back, um what has been like the biggest challenge in designing like AI enemies to feel engaging and varied?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. There's a couple things in a game like this, right? In a roguelike, typically most of the enemies are kind of meant to be kind of a punching bag to help you, experience that like the number is going up thing, right? Like I'm getting stronger, and so the enemies are dying faster, and they usually don't have to be very smart for that, especially because they don't live very long in a roguelike.
Yeah.
Um, However, there's kind of some inherent issues with that for a mech game, where yes, you do want the feeling of like okay, like against like a average. I almost combined average and everyday. If you combine just like a run of the mill like soldier guy, you should win, right? But you should also have the experience of fighting against uh, somewhat equal enemies who are powerful and can keep up. Um, a lot of the fun of a mech game is the movement, and or at least this mech game is the movement and the piloting around. And so part of the way that I've helped to uh, sort of create that experience of the dynamic feeling action, even when you're fighting kind of weaker enemies that aren't very smart, is kind of pivoting to a bullet hell style. um, I at one point in the development I realized, uh, oh, I can, I've created this awesome movement system, but I can win every fight by just kind of strafing to the side until the enemy dies, and that just sucks.
Yeah.
And so, there's like a few changes that I made for that. I played a little bit of Returnal to be like, okay, this is kind of what bullet hell stuff should feel like in a roguelike, especially a third person one. Um, but then on top of that, yeah. So the I'll finish that thought first. the bullet hell thing really helps to make even encounters with normal enemies kind of feel engaging. Because even if the enemies themselves are easy to deal with, you're still kind of having to maneuver around this like cloud of projectiles that's kind of surrounding you and sort of forcing you to actually use the movement system, right? There was a video from Jonas Tyroller that I watched where he talked about basically the core, you know, gameplay of your game should like obviously it has to be fun on its own, but you also want to sort of force the player to make interesting decisions
Yeah.
frequently. And so it's like, oh, I have to decide, like, do I have enough energy to like do a dash? Can I just like glide out of the way? Do I, you know, oh, there's like another wave coming. Do I jump over it? Do I try to like get behind cover? You know, there's all sorts of little like micro decisions to do. And I think that helps keep the game feeling really fun, even against, you know, weak enemies. Um,
I
and
think
so
that
then,
ties into real quick the like customization side too, because like
yeah,
then it's like that's another spot where it's going to have an impact. Like it's like, are you going to be a
hmm
little slower because of your build, and then are you going to need to maybe keep more eye out for like the fog or like that sort of thing where you're like trying
yeah,
to have to like dodge it, right?
hmm
So yeah, I think that this all like creates an environment where the decisions do matter.
yeah, exactly. Because yeah, like you might have a lightweight build that's really fast and can get out of the way, but like maybe it struggles a little bit more with energy efficiency, or maybe it's better at
Right.
like flight boosting than it is at like dashing to the side. So like even then, right? It's like you could have a fairly similar, like you could have two light builds that are similar in a lot of ways, but one is better at flying and one is better at, you know, dashing, dodging, whatever. And so even those builds will make a different decision in that moment. And but
Yeah.
that, you know, even then it's like maybe you have a shield generator pack so you can actually take a hit and you'll like take that opportunity to like rush in and like, you know, do some
Yeah.
big damage to the enemy, you know. And so just tons of variety there. Um, but then on top of that, uh, there's actually, and this is kind of part of what initially had me start the playtest kind of by accident is, um, you know, most of the enemies in my game don't actually lead their shots on the player, right? Because, you know, when you're moving, if like anyone who knows what they're doing knows that like if they shoot where you're at when they're shooting, you'll be somewhere else by the time the projectile gets to you. And so I added the ability for some enemies to actually lead their shots against the player. Um, you know, which kind of gives you the experience of fighting another mech, right? Where it's like, oh, this this is like a real danger that's harder to avoid. I have to like, you know, take them out really fast to take minimal damage, or I have to, you know, play evasively, like, you know, avoid them, stuff like that.
Right.
Um, I actually ended up implementing a mechanic that made it so that the faster the player is moving, the less accurate the enemy's like projectile leading is. So it kind of
Oh.
comes back to that thing from before, right? Of like, oh, like, you know, for the player, it feels bad to like have the game just decide they miss, but like if it's the enemy, like it's
Then
fine.
that's okay. Yeah.
And you know, like I'll probably refine the system more, but I'm pretty sure Warframe has a similar system where it's like enemy accuracy is really, you know, changed by how much you're moving and how evasive you are, and so that way, you know, lighter builds kind of have a built-in like evasion level that heavier builds might not. Um,
That ties into also making it to where the player's choices feel like they matter. It's like even
mhm,
though you're adding in statistics for that spot, right? That case where it benefits the player, um,
mhm.
it makes sense in the game, even if it doesn't make sense in real life. That they would have
Yeah,
that like little boost, you know.
exactly. Yeah, and then, you know, even another level on top of that, there's enemy like full on mechs like the player that you can run into, and those guys have, you know, even more advanced AI stuff going on, right? Where like if they have the energy and like, you know, a missile is near them, they'll dodge, because of course they'll dodge. They're an enemy pilot. Like why would they not dodge
Yeah.
a missile? And they'll actually try to, you know, fly up if you're above them, or they'll, you know, the spot that they try to move to is actually behind you instead of just like to where you are. So like if they can get behind you, it's like, then you're kind of screwed. And so it's like you have a reason to kind of actually pay attention to what they're doing and how they're moving. And that's a system that I'm planning to enhance even more to make them, kind of make different decisions based on what kind of weapons they have and things like that. And it's all about creating interesting experiences. I think in games like Armored Core, stuff like the arena is really fun because it's cool to test your build against other builds, right? I've tentatively said I won't do an arena, but based on community stuff, I'd say there's a good chance that I'll have some kind of arena just because people want it. And,
Yeah.
Ultimately as an indie, yes, you're making a game for yourself to enjoy and stuff, but you also want your game to succeed. And so it's good to do things your community likes. And I don't think it'll be the end of the world to do. It was just, you're always trying to cut scope a little bit as an indie, but, as I make the decision process more interesting for enemy mechs, it'll create even more variety. And the cool thing about that is that it's more variety that doesn't require you as a developer to add more content necessarily.
Right.
Maybe it benefits from you having more content, but it's multiplicative, right? It's like the more content you have, if you have something that's making decisions based on its, equipment and stuff, then you can kind of, like I said, multiply it out based on that. And it's like, oh, now I have all sorts of experiences the player can have. And I can create them by, entering something in a spreadsheet.
Right.
So,
Were there any like major mechanics that you initially planned but had to completely cut?
yeah, there's so one thing that I sort of early on decided to cut, that is again kind of in that category of people really want it, but I'm still fighting it a little bit. In the Armored Core games, your mech can have different leg types. So, for example, there's like normal biped legs, which just works how a human's legs do. And then there's reverse joint, which is kind of comparable to like a dog's legs, I guess. Where it's still the same components, but you're basically walking on like the toe pad as opposed to the foot, right? Where the foot kind of extends up. And then there's quad legs where you have like 4 legs. You kind of walk like I was going to say like a spider, but spiders don't have 4 legs. They have 8, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then there's, tank treads, which lets you kind of have a heavier build where you can like, carry more and, shoot certain weapons that would cause you to have to like stop moving while moving and stuff like that. Early on, I kind of made the decision that no, I'm not going to have multiple leg types because one, it's more animation and stuff to support. But two, with the shell system, which I was working on at the time, the 3D models that I make for the different parts would need to work for different leg types.
Right.
And so you kind of have this situation where it's like, okay, like I'd like to add more leg types, but if it's going to require me to make, a whole new set of 3D models per set that I add to the game per leg type, it's not that it's impossible, but this isn't my full-time job.
Right.
I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
And so it's something that would be cool to maybe have like later on. I actually, even though I'm talking about it in the sort of cut content portion, maybe a little over a week ago, I was adding, some new stuff to the game to support new enemy types and stuff. And I actually added a sort of quad leg just because it's good for like, it looks mechanical and interesting. And I did test it out with the shell system as is, and it does look decent. I'm still kind of on the fence about where it would fit into the game, sort of balance wise, right? As like it has to be differentiated from the other leg type. So balance is one thing. Another thing is if I have two leg types, I think people will be much more likely to expect more.
Right.
Right. So does it open the door for expectations that are just going to be too much to meet? Three, like, do the existing shells look good? Which, like, they look fine. Not like incredible, but fine, I think. Four, it's extra animations that would have to be supported. But then five, the way that the shell system works, they're every part is kind of based on what I call a schematic, which is just like the data that is like enough to derive the actual stats. So like I don't save like, oh, this person has this part which has 100 health, 500 defense, like 30 missile lock power. Like I just save what the component shells are. And so it would require me to kind of update how that is handled, and legs would have to have a whole exclusive because I also store like what the part type is on that, so that I can kind of have them all be the same type for like generation of new parts and stuff like that. And so then I would have to add a new stat onto every single part schematic that is only relevant for legs, and it's not,
I
none of it is
trust
impossible.
you. I trust like it. I trust that if you said not in this game, right? Like I think you have feasibly looked at it from like looked at it from like a big scope, and it's like, do I want to spend another year adding this sort of thing? I'm working as on a side project. I also think it's okay to like say these things would be great. Let me not rush to get them in, and instead spend the time to implement it in the next game or in like something like an add-on. The same with the arena
Yeah.
stuff. I think that would be really cool. I can see where this game would lend well to also having like a PvP sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see
And co-op
like,
was something that early on I wanted, that I've a lot, but like a lot of people have asked about it, right? And so it's the balance of like, what I've kind of committed to with co-op is like, okay, if the game does well enough for me to go full time, right? Like when I don't have that time crunch and stuff like that, I'll give it a shot, right? I'll give it an honest
yeah,
try, like, but it's just not something I can commit to ahead of time. And I'd say there's a good chance that additional leg types will fall into that, unless I end up in a situation where, the game is like 2 months from coming out and I have, way more content than I think I really need. And I'm like, okay, how about I add, some extra leg parts or something? Like I'll do some new animations and stuff since everything else is final.
yeah,
But yeah, it's one of those things where, I think there's a world where as a game developer, you find a path to working on your game full time before it's out, but I don't think that's something you can ever bet on. It's like super unlikely. I've had a couple people ask about it. I'm considering starting a Patreon. I actually just today I put the game's playtest on itch.io. Um, and it's free because it's obviously early, but I also have an option for people to donate if they want to, when they
yeah,
download it, if they want to try to support the project. And so it's like, if the stars align, if the YouTube channel does well enough to be monetized, things like that. If the stars align, I think there's a lot of sort of like quote unquote stretch goals that are suddenly on the table. But um,
yeah.
yeah, at this point, I'm really trying to plan pessimistically and realistically to get the game done, and released at the around the time that I'm planning, which is August, which is about 4 months at this point, which is not awful, but it's not, you know it's not a huge amount of time, and I really need to. There's so many other things that go into making a game, as I'm sure right? Like I have to make sure everything's polished. I have to fix all the bugs. I have to make all the quality of life stuff good. I have to add all
Right.
the settings and accessibility stuff, which is important. I have to do the, Steam achievements. I have to, get everything approved. I have to create an LLC, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
just like there's so much to do, and when I also have a day job and my time is so limited, I just have to be careful. But um, yeah, with most things, I'm not saying never. I'll say PvP would be a step above co-op. It's
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
getting good net code is always a challenge. That's one that I've kind of every once in a while someone will ask for something, and usually it's kind of a joke, but I'll just be like, nope, that's not happening. That's a hard no. Sorry.
RIG Riot 2. I mean,
Yeah.
there'll be a there. I'm certain your game is gonna do well, and I'm certain there will be. I'm gonna knock on wood, but like, um, there's always like the future, and I think you're building like a really good, solid foundation.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's a lot of things I would love to add in free updates, or like if it's big things like a DLC or something down the road, like an expansion, right? But yeah, there's always more time, but for now I just need to make the first game.
right, and that's the thing. That's a big thing for like indie devs. It's like just get that game out at least.
Mhm.
That's the start of it all. Uh,
It's crazy how much sorry to interject, but
no, you're good.
it's crazy how much even just getting a playtest out there kind of feels like a diet release, right? And I recognize it's kind of an area where I think because of the game I'm making, I'm lucky to have like a community of people that are really excited about the game and want to provide that feedback, right? A lot of devs have to, pay to have their games play tested, right? Which is and it's like a bunch of money for like a half hour of people's time. And I'm over here like I have people playing, I don't know any specific numbers. It's not something I track, but I'm sure there's people with over 20 hours in the game, and it's a play test, right? It's got, a fourth of the levels it'll have eventually. It's got like,
Yeah.
a third to a fourth of the mech parts. It's got way less mods than it'll have. Like it's, there's a lot more coming, and people are already spending a lot of time with it. And getting that feedback of like, this needs optimization help, this needs to be better quality of life, this needs, the balance is off on this, or whatever, um, it's a lot of stuff that they say that you should really, especially with a game that isn't like drop dead gorgeous, like to the degree that it'll go viral, right? um, they say that you really need to get your demo and stuff out as quickly as possible so that you can one, like get people excited about it, to because like if the core gameplay is really fun, people will spend a lot of time with your demo, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good way to know if your game will like actually do really well. um, and like on top of that, a demo is a way to get feedback on things that need work. Part of the reason that a lot of the time you'll be recommended to create a separate page for your demo on Steam is because people can leave reviews for demos now, if they have a separate page. And so that's a way for you to like gather feedback on what people's experience is with it. And like, you can have like, trackers or whatever to like realize like, oh, like this is kind of a kill screen, right? Like people start it, they get here, and then they stop playing. It's like clearly something is going wrong there. Um,
Right.
and you want to filter those things out. And so playtesting ahead of my demo is, I think, going to make the official start of like the marketing, where I'm reaching out to, influencers, streamers, YouTubers, whatever, all the more effective, because it'll be that much more refined. So
Because you already found the simple bugs like the dust being
yeah,
too high res and
exactly.
stuff. Like,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Jumping over to like some technical questions.
Mhm.
What game engine do you develop in, and is there a particular reason why you use that one?
Yeah, so I'm making Rig Riot in Unreal Engine. Um, when I started, the sort of whole thing with Unity for the pay per install was kind of fresh in my mind, and frankly, with that having happened, there's I've kind of made the decision that there's not really a world where I use Unity. Um, I feel like there's enough good options that I don't need to I don't need to support a company that's willing to do stuff like that.
Right.
Um, not to say that other developers are wrong for using Unity. I know that like I'm pretty sure their CEO has changed since then and stuff like that. So I'm sure it's better now. But I also had just always been really, I'd always seen these really impressive kind of demos and games and stuff made in Unreal, where it was just these incredibly beautiful, realistic, scenes that just ran fantastically. Um, and it kind of gave me the impression that like if I wanted to make a 3D game, it would have to be in Unreal. That's actually something that was kind of interesting when I was first starting. I think a lot of developers kind of fall into the trap of doing like pixel art games, and there's some inherent difficulties there, right? One is that pixel art is hard. Uh, everyone's like, oh, it's just pixels, it can't be that bad, but it is that bad. It's really hard. You like it's art, it's
Yeah.
not it's not something you can fake. um and so like there's that huge learning curve that so many people fall into, but then on top of it, uh on Steam, like whether or not it's right, the perception that that gamers have when they see a pixel art game is usually that it's like cheap, right? That
Right.
that it's like kind of bad, kind of a budget thing. Um, to the point where like even if your game is a gorgeous pixel art game, like your capsule still should be, like a different like illustrated piece or something. And like if
It's
you're
funny you
going to
mentioned
make
that because I never realized that, but that makes sense actually now that I
yeah,
think about it.
yeah, it's like are you familiar with the game Blasphemous? It's like
Yes, I
it's like
think so.
like a Metroidvania pixel art, gorgeous, fantastic. And if you're making a pixel art game, that's the minimum. Like you can't make something that's not fantastically beautiful, because it'll look bad because people have seen so many pixel art games, and like Steam
Yeah.
customers know what they're doing, right? They know like, oh, this looks like um this looks like a game that I've played before that I like. This looks like an asset flip, right? This looks like a cheap first game made by someone who doesn't know how to make art.
Right.
And like you can't fool them, and you don't want to, right? Negative reviews on Steam are caused, either by people who can't run your game for like a technical reason or something, or by their expectations being inaccurate, right? So like if you make it seem like your game is, something it's not, maybe you'll get some sales, but then they'll probably get refund, and you'll get, negative reviews, and you don't want that, and you don't want to waste people's time anyway, right? Like
Right.
we're indies, we
Yeah.
care, and so we don't want to create that situation. And so, I considered the pixel art thing at one point, but I kind of came to the conclusion that it would be easier to sort of learn how to do like rudimentary 3D modeling and stuff than it would be to do, um, pixel art, right? Like if I was doing my game as pixel art, and if I had done pixel art, it would have been like there's a lot of cool games like this, the like sort of HD 2D thing where it's like maybe the character is a sprite, but then the world is 3D and stuff. And it's
Oh,
like, well,
right.
yeah. And it's like, well, if I'm going to have to make the world 3D anyway, I might as well do it for the player. And then, like especially if you are happy with like a PS1 style, PS2 style graphical presentation, it's it's not awful. Like it's not that hard to do. Like it'll take some time to like hone your skill and stuff like that, and like to get a better eye. I mean, I think you've said that you're an artist primarily, right? I know you.
No, programming was what I did professionally, but I
Okay, you did.
do
Okay,
art like on I always did art prior to programming and like I enjoy
yeah.
doing art still. Yeah.
Okay. That yeah. So that's what I was remembering. But yeah, it's like as an artist, right? Like you know that you don't just start. I
Yeah.
mean, at some point you have to just start, but like you don't start at like a spot where you could like do it commercially for
Oh,
sure, right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically not. Yeah.
But you know, if it's like, okay, well, I can actually do things that are fairly simple and make them look good with, you know, doing like technical art and stuff like that, then, you know, you can go a long way. Just kind of, you know, on your technical skills and your rudimentary art. And especially, you know, I think I'm a little bit lucky too, because lucky, or, you know, there's a whole debate of like if you need to be lucky to succeed in game development. I don't think so. I think I'm not
I
going
think
to
you're
go
putting
into it
time in.
just yet, but yeah,
I wouldn't call
I
it
think,
luck by any means.
yeah, I think it's about like making the right decisions and making the right game, because you know I've watched a lot of videos of people being like, oh, I tried every game on Steam to find you know, hidden gems, and like usually the consensus is that there aren't hidden gems on Steam,
Oh,
you know, and because like the games that deserve to do well will do well, uh, because you know, at the end of the day, gamers will try games that are, you know, what they're interested in. There are certain genres that do better on Steam, and so if you, you know, the the reason that I think so many games fail on Steam is, you know, and I'm not the expert on this. I've just watched too many Chris Zukowski videos, like probably every other, or maybe not every other indie dev, but you know, so many people are making puzzle games which do awfully on Steam. People are making 2D platformers which do awfully on Steam. They're making pixel art games with bad pixel art which do awful on Steam.
I'll
You
say
know?
though, I do want to say like if not having good art or whatever is holding you back, just make your game. And like, you know,
Yeah.
there was that one like Stickman game where he was in
Hmm.
like the Wild West, and you know, it's like you can make it work, but
Yeah.
I think the difference is like um some of these
It,
games that get regurgitated, you can
yeah.
tell they're just making a game to try and make a game, you know, or to
Yeah.
try and make money. And it's like, that's where it's like, you can tell when there's like actual heart and thought. Like with yours, I can tell
Yeah.
there's a lot of heart and thought, and every decision
Yeah.
that you're making like has a lot of thought to it. But I'm also like very much like supportive of like, just make your game.
Yeah.
It's okay if it's bad
Absolutely.
pixel art or asset
Right. And
flipping.
that's the thing. Like, none of this is me saying that people shouldn't make those games. I have no, you know, I'm glad those games exist, right? Like, I've certainly played and enjoyed a lot of games that like might be considered substandard, right? I think more the point I'm trying to make is that if the goal is to publish a commercial game on Steam that like does well enough for you to, you know, like go full time or something, um,
Right.
there's a little bit of a formula to follow. And you know, even like talking about the art stuff, I don't want it to come across like I'm saying that you have to be a fantastic artist to make a good game. I wouldn't describe myself as like a fantastic artist. I love art. I've done art, you know, for a long time, and so I think that makes like my eye for what's good and not good better. But like I'm not a fantastic 3D artist. In fact, like it's been kind of humbling to see some of the like fan art 3D models that like the community has made of the mechs in my game,
Oh, that's so
right? Like
awesome that you're getting
it's
that stuff.
it's
I'm happy for
it's
you.
surreal. Thank you. Yeah, it's there's no feeling like seeing people make fan art of something that you created.
Yeah.
It's just it's unreal. And but like, you know, I see that stuff and I'm like, wow, these people are better artists than I am. But like it, you know, it's more about consistency and having like an art style, right?
Yeah.
Because people like uh you know, I second guess my art a lot, partially because there's been just a couple instances where I've been like, oh, I think my game's in a spot where it looks really good and I'm ready to like show it off or whatever. And then I get feedback that it's really not. And like, that's good to know, right? Like you only get to
Yeah.
make one first impression. And so you do need to do a good job. If your goal is like succeeding commercially, going full time, whatever.
Right.
Um, and so I question it a lot, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from my community that like, oh no, like we really like your designs. We like the you know the simplicity, the like the way that like it captures the idea without being um, crazy over the top, and it's more performant, right? Which people like, and a lot of people
Yeah.
enjoy the PS1 art style, right? Like I never had a PS1. It was kind of before my time, and I just never really had home consoles. I was more of a handheld, kind of guy. I had a Game Boy and a DS, and I loved that. But like even not having the nostalgia, I really love, the look of PS1 stuff. And you can do that without being like the most, like competent artist. So
Yeah.
really I think the point I'm trying to make is that like, um, there's some pitfalls that a lot of people fall into with stuff like pixel art and stuff, and it's fine to make pixel art stuff, and I think it's cool. It's just about sort of setting your expectations where it's like, if your goal is to succeed, you can get away with something simpler as long as it's
Right.
cohesive and still looks good. It doesn't, even like, uh, as a musician, right? Like one of there's kind of a path of like you're learning, and like people are like, oh, you sound good, and then like you're getting better and better, and people kind of stop commenting, and then you learn like, oh, I need to actually like be more intentional about where I put the complicated in-depth stuff, because people appreciate
Oh,
simplicity. They
right.
understand it. um and it's not that they don't appreciate complicated and deep things, but um there's expectations to manage, and uh, I guess diminishing returns maybe there. Yeah, I don't know. I've maybe lost the plot a little bit, but yeah,
No, it's
I
okay. I
totally
get what you're
agree that.
saying, though. Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree that people should just make their games, and like, um, I the common wisdom is that your first game is supposed to fail. Um, and that's what I've been kind of repeating to myself over and over, even as I'm starting to have some proof, and hope that like my game actually could like succeed enough for me to go full time with this. Even then I'm trying to be really careful, right?
Yeah.
The game is closing in on 3,000 wish lists after a couple
Jeez.
months, and like I haven't really started on like real marketing, right? Like, it's just that like when I've put it out there, it's kind of people have been like, oh, that's cool, we like, other people are like, oh yeah, we want something like that, and so it's picking that up. But like even then, it's such a volatile industry that like I'm still
Right.
not betting that it's going to work out. um I think having the community around me makes me more confident, because like there's less chance that I'll miss something. But I think that's a lot of the problem that people run into with making their first game, is that you'll always miss things. And once you've put your first game out there, you kind of know what to look for, and like what things you can't afford to miss. And that's why so many people are way more likely to succeed on their first game, but also it's why so many people, kind of feel defeated after their first game doesn't do well. But yeah, like end of the day, like get your game out. Like, if it's like a personal, emotional like thing that you care about, like that's huge. That's really important. And like, I want that
Yeah.
game to exist. If it's you just like learning your stuff and like figuring out what the mistakes are that you have to avoid, I want you to do that too, because it's hugely important. And um, yeah, so not, none of this is me trying to be elitist or anything. I still haven't released a game. I,
No, it
I
didn't seem
am.
elitist. It seemed like you
Yeah.
were speaking from experience, where it was like, there's reasons why I went the route that I did.
Yeah, yeah, I know sometimes, I can phrase things a little too directly and it can come across harsh. So I'm just trying to do some pre-damage control there. Yeah, but
I think with your game, again, like you can tell that there's like a lot of heart and thought put into it. And then hearing you talk, you can hear like all the thought that goes into making what I think is like a good game. So there are different, you can set out to just make a game and it might not be good. I think that's another thing that kind of ties into what you're saying, where it's like there's a difference between like making a game and making like a good game, and then yeah, like a really really good game. And I think when I saw your game,
Yeah.
even just seeing it, I was
Mhm.
like oh, this is special. Like,
It's
or like, yeah, I
yeah,
don't know.
it's been uh so I mentioned earlier that I have ADHD, right? So and I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. And so I've always felt like I'm like competent at things, but I've also always worried that I'm lazy. Uh because I just, it's so hard for me to start things or finish things or whatever. But some of the, like, as the community's built up, I've asked a lot of people how they found out about the game and stuff like that. And a lot of people, are like, oh, I saw one of your devlogs and I saw how good the movement looked. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, like that looks, that looks on par with Armored Core 6. Like I have to try this. And, like, again, like I look at my game as not one that has like viral, potential, right? Like I don't look at it as one that's like going to take off from like a random post blowing up. Um, I I think I've had like a few like mini blow ups, which I wouldn't call viral, but I would call at least like a really good indicator of like there's a real market for the game. Um, there's still a part of my brain that anytime I have a surge like that I'm like, all right, that's it. I've now found every single person that's interested in my game. I'll never have another wish list.
That's a funny
uh,
take. I don't think that's the case.
it's probably kind of brain dead, but it's it, but the with so many people being like, oh, like this movement system looks really incredible and really satisfying. And then like, that kind of set me up with like, oh, now I'm like worried that I'm deceiving people because maybe it looks better than it actually is because I'm still a first time dev and I don't think it's that crazy. But then
Right.
people have their hands on it and like people are like, holy crap, this game feels good. And like they'll have all sorts
Nice.
of like issues with it that they'll like list out and then they'll go back to playing it. And it's like, the fact that people are enjoying the gameplay enough to fight through the jank and still spend tons of hours on it, and like, to see people posting like their fashion in the Discord, or to post like, oh, I got to stage 9, right? Like,
Yeah.
currently that's the furthest someone has gotten in the game, and I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to see like, you know if people get further, if they, like what their build is to do it, like how it goes for
Yeah.
them, especially as balance and stuff changes here and there. um I don't even remember what point I was making. Oh yeah, the just like seeing people's experiences of like how it feels to play it and like how they felt seeing it has really made me sort of regain some like faith in myself as just like a competent person. Right?
Good.
Because the
Yeah.
thing is like, I have a day job and uh I struggle, right? Like I think I'm a great game developer. I think I'm bad at a lot of things. And those things are time management and starting and finishing things that I'm not interested in. Um, and that's part of why I'm taking this process so seriously, is because it's kind of the first time in my life that I feel like I found something that I'm like completely suited to, right? Like even with other things, there's always like, okay, I'm good at it, or I'm like smart enough that I can like brute force my way through. But with game development, it's not hard for me to sit down and work for 10 hours making the game better and like, you know, uh, interacting with the community and fixing bugs and adding
Yeah.
content and like I'll add like I'll do like a big bug fix update, but then I'll also just like throw in some like new content just because like it's fun for me to do that. And like it's not hard for me to do the planning stuff because I'm interested in it. It's not hard for me to work really fast and stuff because I care about the game and I care about people having fun with it. And even if I'm having a day where like it's not a good coding day for me, it's like I can do
Do
some
art.
art, I can write some music. Yeah, like the variety of things that I can jump around between and um, just the experience of it all is part of why I'm taking it so seriously because it's not like I'm at risk of losing my job or something, but it's just enough friction on the day to day that I'm like, no, there's a better way, and so I'm just really serious about making that happen, but also doing it in such a way that it's not like destabilizing, my wife and her dog or something, right? Like they
Right.
still need to eat and have a roof too, and it's not like she works, but like or sorry, it's not like she doesn't work or something, but like like it's a partnership, like everyone's trying to pull their weight. And so it's tough to navigate, but I'm taking it really seriously and being really cautious for those reasons. But it's also important enough to me because of the sort of the proof that like it's something that I'm actually good at.
I'll
So
say, like, at this point, even if you struggle with finishing things, you don't have a choice with this game. Like, there's people that will hunt you down, I'm certain, if you don't release this game.
yeah.
um, but also, like, I always say, like, you can tell when a dev really enjoys development. And like,
Mhm.
this is one of those cases where it's like with the attention to detail and like the making sure things get done right. Like, I can tell without you even saying that you enjoy it, that you enjoy the development process, which I think
Yeah.
is like a really important part of like a good game.
Mhm. I think
And
about the game,
also, oh,
it's like that's if I'm not doing anything, I'm thinking about the game, and so it's just all that extra time processing and thinking about it makes it that much better. But sorry, you were saying.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say the last thing I've talked with another dev about this where I was in a similar boat with like my first couple games where I did the art and programming and then music, although for the music I kind of just threw stuff together. It wasn't like there
Sure.
wasn't a lot of theory behind it. But it was
Sometimes
really
you get really cool
nice.
stuff that way, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it worked. It worked.
yeah,
But like, it was nice being able to shift between where it was like, you know what, this week I don't feel like programming. I'm going to just
yeah,
do art. And I
yeah.
think that like, that was what made like indie development so great to me because it was like whatever you feel like working on, as long as you're getting closer to the end goal somehow, like
Mhm.
that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and it's like that kind of stuff is why as I've continued through the process, like at certain points I've been like, okay, if the game fails, which I would say like my bar for like what feels like success is pretty low. But like if the game fails to like do enough to like make enough for me to go full time or something, right? I've been like, oh, maybe I'll look at finding a game dev job, in the industry or something. But um, the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized like, no, that's probably not me. I'm probably an indie just because of how I work.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
different. It's a way different. So,
yeah, it's like if you're in the if you're doing it for like the passion and because like it, at some point you feel like you can't do anything else just because it's like I have to do this. This is my my opportunity to make something special, right? It's like
yeah.
if you're doing it for that, it's that much harder, I think, to be uh I don't mean this to sound demeaning, but like a cog, right? And the thing is like I think being an indie, I now have that much more appreciation for like AAA stuff, right? Where I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, like the amount of care that had to go into like creating this like impeccable like visual experience and atmosphere and stuff, and like the amount of people working hard at it, like you know towards this shared vision, like that's absolutely incredible. um but I just know that I can't work so narrowly.
Right.
It's just not, like I need to have the holistic vision, and I need to be like doing the things that bring that closer. And that's
Yeah,
just, yeah.
I'll say you have to make some tough decisions, and also it is very different when it's like there were a few times that I had like that I was told like you're not wrong about this, and yes we should implement this, but we just don't have the time. And it's
Yeah.
like that really sucks because you do get really like invested in the stuff you're working on. and
Hmm.
and yeah, like it's like when you're indie you can make the time to
Yeah.
ideally hopefully like take care
It's
of
like
that stuff.
yeah, it's like if August rolls around and the game isn't done, like I'm not going to put it out when it's not done. Like,
Right, right.
and a AAA can't do that, right? Or like
Yeah,
they can delay to a degree, but it's a much bigger decision, right? Whereas like for me, it's like I can be like, okay, I'll keep the day job a little bit longer. Like
yeah.
like I need to make this game like good for the people that want to play it, and so yeah, just the yeah, it's different. And again, like I have no hard feelings toward anyone doing, like larger studios. I know you've worked in studios and
Mhm.
stuff.
And there's a lot of really good people that work
Yeah.
in and that are also passionate too, but
Hmm.
yeah, and I'm not
And they're
trying, I also
specialists,
am not
and like
trying to
they can
speak
do.
negatively, but
No, no,
there is a
yeah.
difference that you can't deny.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, and so it's really just a matter of like I'm not someone who could succeed in those situations, and so like I'm all genuinely, I'm all the more impressed by the people who can,
yeah.
because it's just not something I could probably, you know, make it doing. So
And I do think you being able to have the full creative control is what adds to like making the game that you're working on, it's like so special, like being able to be like, I don't like the way that feels. I am going to tweak that actually.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. Even there's a system in the game. In Armored Core 6, they call it assault boosting, or historically it's overed boost. It's basically just like a super fast movement mode that's like costs a lot of energy. And I had sort of a version of that. Basic. It was based on the one in Armored Core 6. And like I got feedback from people of like, oh, like everything else feels great. This one thing does not feel great. And so I was like, oh, like they're right, and I will change it, and I can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Now we've spoken up really great how solo dev is, but I am curious, like what's one piece of advice that you'd give to others like looking to create a game on the scale that you are?
Yeah, I would say I think the biggest thing is to do it efficiently, right? Like we were talking about working efficiently before. Um, like if you look at like the amount of content that there is to consume in Rig Riot, especially like I mean now or even later, right? It's not all that much. It's a roguelike. It's about the permutations and the discovery of the different situations, and how you as the player handle the different things that can come up. And so I would say the big thing is if you're trying to make something that has staying power, which that's one thing, right? Is like uh, I think for indies, there's different kinds of games that you can make that are likely to succeed, right? Um, and so, I wanted to make something that people could really sink their teeth into for a long time, and that's often what people are looking for. But some people, uh, if you want to make something like linear story narrative, right? They always say you should make a horror game because people are happy with short horror games. They don't want to be scared for 30 hours.
Makes
Um,
sense. Horror's
yeah,
hard to do though and not go into like cross the cheesy. That has its own difficulties.
right. Yeah, it's certainly not something I've worked on, but I know that like it's a good opportunity to sort of like work on your art skill and a good opportunity to
Yeah.
like you can also hide a lot of things, right? Because it's probably going to be dark
Oh, that's
unless you're
true.
like, you know, uh, and again, like on Steam, like, and this is specifically for Steam, right? Because that's what I've targeted. If you're, if you look at reviews that people have, uh, horror games are largely the the only genre that people are like, oh, it was short, and that's like a positive thing.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it'll be like a story based like visual novel or something. I don't think those classically do quite as well as horror games do, but like like there are some genres where it's good to be a shorter, more concise experience, and um I think those are awesome, but that's just not what I was making. And so
Yeah.
if you're trying to make something that people can really sink their teeth into, you want to do something very systems heavy, where like the game will sort of, you know, within the parameters that you've created, it'll create a ton of interesting experiences for the player that you don't have to necessarily orchestrate.
Right.
Maybe you have to decide the highs and lows, right? Like with the part system or something like that. But um, it's much easier to like systemically like decide what that's going to be systemically than it is to decide what it's going to be um just like by making all of those things by hand, right? Like uh there's it's part of why I looked for so long for someone to be making a game like mine is because I thought it was a no-brainer. I was like, it seems harder to make something that's like a story that you're playing through with like missions that are, like linear like levels that you play through, right? Because then you have to make a new level for every experience. And then like on top of that, once the person has played it, it's done, right? Like you don't really get a lot of reuse unless you have like a lot of, like speed running sort of stuff, things like that. And that stuff's cool. And I there's a lot of speedrun games these days, and I think that's really awesome. But if like sheer replayability of like a core game loop is the thing, like I think you really lean into systems and um finding ways that you can like create interactions that like you maybe wouldn't anticipate. um
Yeah.
it's really hard to develop that like from a software perspective, just because like how do you anticipate like the things that you're not anticipating? And ultimately it's the kind of thing where I had to sort of rework my mod system a couple times because um I kind of tried to make it too open at certain points where it was like, oh, like it can kind of do anything. And it's like at a certain point, you kind of have to set your parameters and work within that. And you can do some really cool stuff there. But um, ultimately, if you don't give yourself limits, you'll never stop working on it because it'll never be done.
It's like art,
You'll never,
technically. I
yeah,
mean, because it is art. So it's like, yeah, you have to at some point be like, this is done for now. Like
yeah,
maybe a
exactly.
second one or something.
Right. It's like, okay, maybe I augment what I have later if there's something that I really need. But for now, like this is plenty to work with. Um, and then I think kind of on top of that, and I sort of referenced it earlier, I think you need a really like solid, perfected like core mechanic. Um, and maybe perfected isn't the word, but like it should feel like it, right? Like I talked about the movement in my game.
Yeah.
When I first started working on Rig Riot, I went through the thing that every developer does, where you're suddenly overwhelmed because you're trying to learn, the engine you're working on, and you're trying to learn animation, and you're trying to learn, art stuff. You're trying to, a
Yeah.
million things at once. Um, but once I got past that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start by making the movement system, because I don't think there's a purpose to this game existing if the movement doesn't feel like as incredible and addicting as it did in Armored Core, which is what inspired the game, right? And so the core mechanic that the player is going to be interacting with for tens or hundreds of hours in your game has to feel good. Otherwise, right, like you don't want to do something that feels bad over and over,
Right.
right, just for
Right.
the set
Yeah.
dressing. It's like the set dressing is what lets you do the thing that feels good for so long. And I think that's the strength of my game, and I think that's arguably what roguelikes in general should be going for. I'll maybe get crucified for this, but I haven't played Hades, but I assume that part of the staying power, one, I know the gorgeous art and awesome music and the story advancing between plays is apparently really good, but like the rest of that wouldn't matter if like the like fast-paced action combat and like upgrades and stuff like didn't feel good, right?
Yeah.
It's like you need that foundation, otherwise you just kind of have nothing.
Right.
you know
When it is like an actual game heavy game, because there are a lot of games now that are more like digital books, right? That you can
Mhm.
just kind of click through. And in that case, yeah, maybe the narrative is more important. But with this game, it's like a game, a game. Like there's a lot of,
Yeah,
I can see why you're saying like focus on the system. That's like what's important and get that like initial
yeah.
game feeling good. Like, yeah, that makes sense.
And
100%.
yeah, and I think that's why people have been willing to fight through the jank and the bad user experiences, like of like, oh, it sucks to be shot at while I'm trying to like make a decision about what gun I take or whatever. It's like
But
they'll
I'm
still
still
keep
jumping
playing
back
it.
in. Yeah.
Exactly, because it's like I just want to feel how it feels to move around in this game a little bit more.
I think they
Um,
also trust you. Like, I think it is that. And then also, like, they have a trust that, like, you're going to carry this game to the finish line in a way that people enjoy playing.
mhm.
Which I think is why the community, I mean, I know we've touched on that, but I think that's another reason why the community, they're going to stick around. Like you were saying, how crazy it is that they'll like stick around through all of this. And it's like,
Mhm.
uh, with the way you're handling stuff, I'm not surprised. Like, so
I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, it's very new, and it's there's yeah, I'm really not taking for granted the time people are spending with the game and the feedback that they're leaving and that's the thing, right? It's like, I mentioned earlier, like a lot of developers have to pay for play testing. Um, like I really value the time of the people trying my game, and I want them to have a good
right,
experience. I want them to have fun. Like one of the issues in the game right now is that like some of the controller prompts, like if you're playing on a gamepad, don't work. And I'm like, oh, that's like a really high priority because I care about people not having a jarring, annoying experience.
yeah,
And so it's like I'm gonna fix that today before the before the work week starts again, because it matters to me that people who are trying the game have a good experience, because like even as a playtest, I want it to be fun and performant and smooth,
right,
and it's it's still people's time even if
yeah.
they know it's a playtest. So
I think there's also a lot of people who are similar to you who just want this game. They want to
yeah.
play it, like, So yeah, they trust that you're the dev who's going to like take it to that. So I guess my last question is, what's like one thing that you hope players take away from like experiencing playing your game?
I think I think the main thing would be, so when at some point during development, I kind of stumbled onto another JDC talk. I know we've referenced a couple. It
Yeah.
was by the developer of Slime Rancher, um, and he talked about how it's important for a game to have a place that feels like home, kind of something that like makes it easy to open the game up, right? Like even once someone has bought your game, there's no guarantee that they'll even try it, right? Like I have so many games on Steam that I haven't even started or downloaded, right?
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you're kind of competing against everything, and so you need something that like makes it easy to open the game, um, and the I think in a mech game, I think the garage is that. It's where you go to like tinker with your build and like make it,
Yeah.
make it yours and stuff. Um, and it's like, uh, uh, upgrading or like further refining your build toward the direction that you want is the reason that you like will keep going on these roguelike runs. Like under all of the, achievements and meta progression and unlocks and bosses and stuff. It's like at the core of it, you're opening your garage, tinkering with your build, and then you're going to find more parts, and then you're coming back and tinkering with your build. And I just want that to be like a fun, satisfying thing that people really feel like they can just linger with, right? Like, um, one of my favorite games, arguably my favorite games, is Monster Hunter. And for me, there's nothing quite like just like having the game up, being in like a Discord call with some friends, and like the moment where everyone like has been silent for 20 minutes because everyone's just like tinkering with their build and like
Yeah.
trying to like make stuff better. And then someone's like, oh, does anyone want to go hunt like this with me or whatever? Right. Um, I think there's just something magical about that where it's like you just it's like a moment of calm and peace and
Yeah.
like not to make it something it's not, but like I don't know, like belonging in a way, right? Where it's like, okay, this is like a space where like I'm comfortable, I know what I'm doing, I'm like, like playing around and like just like seeing what happens and
You're building
um
a community. There's definitely belonging. Like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I just want people to feel like the game, I want it to feel like it's full of surprises and interesting possibilities and like they don't have to stop playing once they've, like done all of the things, right? Like I just want to create a game where people won't run into the feeling that I had where I was like, no, like the game is telling me it's over, but I'm not done. I want to make a game where people don't have to run into that, or at least if they do, I don't want it to be in the first, 100 hours. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
and so it's like it's nothing grand, right? And like, um, they always say don't start with your dream game. And I really care about this game and I've dreamed about this game, but there's never been part of me that's thought of it as my dream game. It's just a game that I really want to play. And at the end of the day, I think sometimes it's good to have something that's just like sincere and about fun, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not trying to do anything grand or, revolutionary. I'm just um, trying to do that. I guess if there's one other thing, I would really love for core likes to become more of a thing, like Armored Core like games, because I love my game and I love working on it and I love watching people play it and stuff. But as a game developer, there's always a degree to which you're it's the thing where you're planting trees that like you won't get to sit under, right? I'll never get to discover the secrets in my game for the first time. I'll never get to uh you know get blown away by what the final boss is, or like if discovering a secret enemy or something like that. But like you know, one, I can kind of watch other people do it and really enjoy it through that. That's something I'm really looking
Yeah.
forward to. Um, and something that I've really enjoyed actually. If I ever have like a long day of working on the game and I push an update out, I'm always happy if I can jump into like someone streaming the game and just like watch. I always, my mood just lifts. Like it's crazy. But I really want other people to make games like this that I can play, that I you know, don't have
Yeah.
to make. As much as I love working on it and creating it and want to make more games and stuff, there's just something magical about playing a game and not having to have made it.
Maybe
So
this will be that domino that
I hope
starts
so.
that effect. Yeah.
Or at least part of it. There's definitely been a lot more mech games in general in the last little while. I think other people inspired by Armored Core. I think also a lot of people sort of disillusioned by like AAA stuff. And like, there's even I try to reach out when I see people announce other mech games, because I think it, kind of like what you're doing here. Like, I think it's important for indies to work together and lift each other up and stuff. And it's good
Yeah.
to like connect of like, oh, like, maybe we can do a bundle or something. But like one of the people I reached out to, I they were like, oh, you're the developer of RIG Riot, right? And I was like, this is crazy. And he was like, yeah, your game like helped encourage me to like announce my game. And I was like, oh,
Oh, wow.
that's huge. That's all I want is to show other people that like, like maybe I work fast compared to a lot of people, but I'm not doing anything special. It's just I just
Mm.
care about like the fundamental things being right, and I um what I wanted to make happens to be something that a lot of people wanted to play, but
It's special though, in that what you define as fundamental comes from you having a place of genuine care for like the game and having like it is special. Like,
sure,
yeah, what you're doing is like, yeah, there's a lot of heart
that's fair.
in it.
I can accept that.
Okay, good.
But yeah, just like, yeah, I want other people to see that they could do it too. And I'm uh there's been a number of people who've like, reached out, and I always tell people that I'm happy to um if they're working in Unreal, to answer any questions or like explain things about how my game works. Like eventually I'm once the game is out and I have, time, I want to make some videos like tutorials about how to do like all of the basic,
Oh, wow.
things in my game, just because like I really, I've like we talked earlier about how I've spent a lot of time learning about the genre and researching it and stuff. Um, and I want to share those things with people, and I want it to be, I want to remove some of the stumbling blocks. I don't want to force like other developers to have to retread the same ground that I did. And I'm sure
That's
that
cool.
like if I put that stuff out there, I'll be immediately, embarrassed by all of the things that could have been better. But then I think the genre benefits from it, and it's
You
uh,
just want to play more mech games.
yeah, exactly. It's
You're like, whatever helps get more mech games out there.
exactly. So yeah, at the end of the day, I want to create something really fun that people can sink their teeth into, and um, yeah, that they feel like they can trust the quality of for the whole time. So
I I really appreciate you like coming on, and
of course,
I know I've said this before, but I love hearing just like passionate people talk about the stuff that they're passionate about. I think um yeah, I think that you can tell, like I said, like there's a lot of heart and like thought going into this game, and it is a special game, and what you're doing is special. And you definitely haven't found the last wish list person. Like it's gonna just keep growing from here.